In 1987, CBS brought Dodge City back to life with the TV movie Gunsmoke, Return to Dodge. The promise was simple: familiar streets, familiar faces, a warm ember of Saturday night comfort. One voice, however, stayed off-screen. Ken Curtis turned the invitation down. Reports say the offer felt disrespectfully low, and his refusal read less like starry pride and more like a craftsman's line in the sand from a man who had spent 2 decades earning the audience's trust. To see why that answer felt inevitable, you have to start where his story begins. Lamar, Colorado, 1916. An apartment over a county jail, and a boy named Curtis Wain Gates, whose road to Festus Haggen would wind through music, radio, John Ford's repertory, and a rare ability to be simple on camera in the way that makes a production unthinkable without you. The question isn't why he said no in 1987, it's how he became the kind of person who could. Early years. An apartment over the cells. Lamar's Bent County Jail was not only a workplace downstairs, it was the Gates family's ceiling soundtrack. Living over the cells meant learning to hear things most children never do. The tired voices of lawmen, the hollow footsteps of night, the hush that follows a key turning in a door. In the late 1930s, he tested the discipline of Colorado College and looked toward medicine. The white coats, steady hands, tidy certainties. Music, though, demanded a different kind of certainty. Time, breath, a pause, placed exactly where a listener will lean forward. He discovered early that choosing a profession is choosing the world your words will inhabit. In music, those words would be sung, and therefore remembered. One more door awaited, and beyond it, a bandstand where a famous crooner had just left a vacancy. Breakthrough in music. From Gates to Curtis. In the early 1940s, after Frank Sinatra's departure, the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra needed a new voice. Curtis Gates filled the spot and took a piece of advice that would reshape his life. Adopt a stage name. Ken Curtis arrived on the marquee, and with him a cleaner line between who he had been and who he could become. Dorsey's school was unforgiving about phrasing. A vocal line had to land on the beat as cleanly as a sheriff lays a revolver on a desk. No tremor, no spill. Wartime dance floors asked for even more. Be precise, yet alive. Romantic, yet contained. Curtis learned how to hold a mixed audience in the palm of his hand and release feeling exactly on the hi-hat's tick. That musical economy, trusting pauses, cutting excess, hitting the note rather than the shout, would become the grammar of his acting. Music had taught him how to be spare without being thin. Voices of the Prairie, stage and radio. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, Curtis stepped into a world where American roads themselves seemed to sing. With the Sons of the Pioneers, prairie legends and trail ballads like Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky became mile markers of memory. Parallel to the touring stage, a 15-minute syndicated radio program, Chuck Wagon Jamboree, gave him a different kind of classroom. The format was simple and wise. Song, short story, another song. A host's voice stitched the blocks together, sliding from tenderness to grin, from grin to the half-light of a recollection. Curtis learned to carry listeners minute to minute without begging for attention, guiding it instead. Radio enforced respect for time. Every phrase had to work, and loose words only weakened the signal. The habit of building bridges, between moods, between scenes, would later make Festus the hinge that let other characters swing. Ford and Wayne's Hollywood, the visible supporting man. The 1950s brought the hardest and most honorable of screen disciplines. John Ford's company, often alongside John Wayne. In Ford's world, a supporting role lives as if the scene's seam will split without it. Curtis studied the craft of the unspoken, how a pause, a glance, or a turn of the shoulders tells truth without commentary. Life echoed work when he married Barbara Ford in 1952, the director's daughter, a personal chapter that also marked him as a house regular in a closely knit circle. His musical training helped him ride the rhythm of a scene. He could hear the beat under dialogue and enter at the exact bar that kept the frame together. Bit by bit, he built a rare trade, becoming the indispensable second line that prevents the melody from fraying. The big meeting with the biggest audience, however, was not in theaters, but in living rooms across America. Festus on Gunsmoke, a guest who stayed 11 years. In 1964, Festus Haggen was meant to be a one-off, a dust devil of a man passing through Gunsmoke on CBS. Audiences latched onto him instantly. The grin under the mustache, the good sense without sermon, the voice in which a road could be heard. Festus stayed for 11 seasons and hundreds of episodes, helping turn a supporting role into the show's emotional ballast. On-screen chemistry with James Arness's Matt Dillon and Milburn Stone's Doc Adams made Dodge City feel less like a set and more like a place worth returning to. Festus became the bridge between Matt's stern line and Doc's dry wit. His jokes bled off pressure without draining principle, and his gentleness never asked the world to be softer, only more bearable. That blend of humor and dignity is the reason the character felt like company rather than spectacle. Viewers didn't see a winner, they saw an honest companion on the trail. Behind the curtain, principles and friction. The 1960s and 1970s were years of big ratings and bigger stakes. Audience chatter sometimes imagined Curtis chafing in the shadow that a lead like Arness inevitably casts. Milburn Stone's name, too, came up when people traded stories of hard arguments. Reports suggest that Curtis and producer John Mantley occasionally locked horns, less about slogans than about working terms, creative calls, and pay. Around Amanda Blake, tabloids did what tabloids do. Comparisons with Dennis Weaver followed the natural arc of fan mythology when one favorite succeeds another. The part that matters is simpler. Curtis remained a professional on set and saved his stubbornness for the value of the work itself. He did not argue for pretty legends. He argued for scenes that played true and for respect owed to the people who made them. That same posture would guide his most public decision years later, when nostalgia asked him to step back into an old hat. 1987. The return that didn't happen. Gunsmoke, Return to Dodge, promised the comfort of reunion. Few returns would have meant more to longtime viewers than the rasp and warmth of Festus, soundtrack to family rooms where the week exhaled. Yet, by most accounts, the offer placed before Ken Curtis felt too low to honor the years that had built the character, and he declined. In the late 1980s, television movies often gathered original casts to harvest affection, but recognition is more than applause and ratings. It is also the terms that refuse to cheapen a lifetime's craft. Read that way, his refusal looks less like a missed cameo and more like a line drawn in clear daylight. Respect for a character begins with respect for the actor who kept him alive. The decision cost him screen time, but it preserved something rarer, the straightness he had worked by since the first downbeat. Late years and the quiet road home. Curtis never hid his civic sympathies. He backed Barry Goldwater in 1964 and Ronald Reagan in 1976, not as a slogan machine, but as a citizen who knew where he stood. In 1983, he appeared in NBC's The Yellow Rose, and he later turned up in a television project that would mark a threshold. These later turns were not frequent, but they carried weight. Each felt like a visit from an old friend who speaks softly, and only when he has something to say. Home in Clovis, California, gave him a quiet harbor. Habits kept. Voice guarded. The ordinary dignity of days well lived. On April 28, 1991, Ken Curtis died in his sleep at home. At the family's wish, his ashes were scattered over the plains of Colorado. The geography closed as if on a drawn line. From Lamar to Dodge City and back to the big sky that first taught him to listen. Finale. A legacy without loud words. Western myths love fireworks, duels at noon and speeches that echo off canyon walls. Ken Curtis left a different design behind. He came to television from Tommy Dorsey's Bandstand, from a little radio room where a host wove songs and stories, from John Ford's school of the supporting man who holds a scene together while someone else rides the center. Beginning in 1964, his Festus Haggen became a sound people recognized in 2 syllables, a joke lined with miles of road, a kindness that never confused gentleness with giving in. a quiet that could make a room feel safe. He did not chase headlines, did not build a career out of alarm, and did not mistake a pose for a principle. When the past called in 1987 and asked him to return on the old terms, he answered the way he had always sung and played, honestly. That is why Festus has outlived the cycle of fashion. A character crafted without hurry survives the era that hurries. For millions, Ken Curtis is not only a name in the credits of an old show. He is a sign of working goodness, the kind that does not shout and does not waver. If you remember why you smiled when you heard his voice, you already know the legacy. Quiet, persistent, like a steady step down a dusty Dodge City street.